Okay, Boker Tov. Before we start, of course, today's learning should be Nishmat Avigdor Avram ben Meir Tzvi Rachalea. When we start, we'll be on the bottom of page 89 in the little booklet, in the small print, and near the end of a paragraph that starts with the words V'im tishal v'tomar, and right before Ach ha'prishut hara. So if you don't have the same printing. So I got back, Baruch Hashem, on Thursday last week, and I've been asked many times, like, so how was your trip? It's a good question. So I was in Toronto and Chicago. My mom's in Toronto, so I have 1.5 million cousins there, which we've seen each other over the years. It's a simcha, how you doing? But this was us tachlis only family. It was phenomenal. That part was phenomenal. But I'm Posner. Any Posner that's not Chabad pretty much is irrelevant. Yeah, probably the Bayit. So I'm sure. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of family there. Baruch Hashem. It's great to see the family in Chicago. It's much greater to be home. I'm very happy to be home. Baruch Hashem, and we move on. So, okay, where we are holding is the middle of the chapter on the Chelkei Prishut. What exactly is Prishut? What is this midah? What's good about it? He basically broke it down into two sections: the good Prishut and the bad Prishut. Right now, we're finishing up the paragraph on the good Prishut, and he was giving us where I left off a few weeks ago was a story that I said, "Oh, I'm going to come back to." So let me explain to you the story. I'm going to actually read it from the Gemara. I have it on my phone. I decided not to print it out. Some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may not be. The story itself sounds like it may have, it has absolutely no ramifications nowadays. Sadly, it did many years ago. We will see what I'm talking about in a minute. So first, if you look in the text near the end of that paragraph, just before where it says Ach ha'prishut hara, just before it, it says, we saw the situation where Eliyahu said, Shamar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who said to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, b'maseh de Ula bar Koshev, regarding the incident of Ula bar Koshev, Shivo, when he responded, V'lo mishnahi, af hu amar lo v'chi mishnat chasidim hi. I'm not even going to translate this. Let me explain to you what was going on here, and then I'm going to explain what his point is. I'll read you a Gemara. It's Gemara Yerushalmi. It says as follows: Tani, we learned that it was stated in a Braita Mishnah. Siot bnei Adam shayu malchim baderech upagu lahem goyim. What happens if you have a group of people that are traveling and they get surrounded by non-Jews? V'amru, and they say to these Jews, Tnu lanu echad mikem v'narog oto. Give up one person and we will kill him. V'im lav, and if you don't, harei anu horgim et kulchem. We're going to kill all of you. So it says, even if they're all going to get executed, you don't give up a Jew. Except, but if they specifically said, give us so-and-so, Kagon Sheva ben Bichri, like the situation of Sheva ben Bichri, those of you who learn Sefer Shmuel, you may remember, it was a guy who was basically marked for the death penalty. He ran away, he was in hiding, and they surrounded the city and said, give us him or we're wiping out the city. So, but if they do state, give us somebody like the case of Sheva ben Bichri, then you can give him up. But you can only give up that person if you know for a fact that for whatever reason he's already subject to the death penalty for some reason. Rabbi Yochanan goes a step further. He says, if they say, give us Mr. X and we'll kill him, otherwise we kill everybody, they made that choice for you, even if he's not ra'ui to the death penalty in Jewish law, you can give him up. Now, before I go any further with the Gemara and why he's going to quote the following story, understand that this topic, unfortunately, you'll find in Shelot and Shuvot of the Holocaust, where the Jewish council of various ghettos were told by 9 a.m., give us 15 people, we kill 1,000, whatever. I'm making the numbers up, obviously. And they had to, it was a horrific choice that had to be made in, unfortunately, many situations. And there are Shelot and Shuvot that dealt with it contemporaneously, then after the fact, just the halakha, not saying they did the right thing or the wrong thing, but just what would be the halakha. So it's based on this Gemara about Sheva ben Bichri. So what does that have to do with us? Ula bar Koshav tivate malchuta. So this man, Ula bar Koshav, was being pursued, let's say, by the government. I mean, the government wanted to take him, I assume, to execute him for some reason. Atun va'akfu medinta. So what did he do? He ran away into a different city. Where'd he go? He went to the city of Lo. Amru lahen, idlen atun yahavun le lan, ana machrivim medinta. So they came to the city and they said, look, either you give up this guy, or we're going to wipe out the city. Salak gabe Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, ufai sev yahavi lo. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi went to him, this man, and he said, look, you got to give yourself up, because otherwise we're all going to die. And he agreed. So this man, meaning Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, was a very well-known individual. For those of you who learn Gemara, or even if you don't, you may know the name. It used to be that on a regular basis, Eliyahu Navi would appear to him, and suddenly he stopped appearing to him. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, he realized something he must have done wrong, and he fasted many, many fasts. And then suddenly the Eliyahu appeared to him. Amarle, you think, like he's like, I guess he must ask, like, why haven't you come to me? He says, you think I'm going to be coming to someone who's a moser? A moser is a term, halachic term, where you give over a fellow Jew to a government that's corrupt, that would not deal with them on a legal basis. You think I'm going to give you up to come to a person like you? I follow the rules. They said it to me, like the Sheva ben Bichri, we have to do it. He says, says, this is for Hasidim, meaning you're not at that level. You're not one of these unique individuals who can actually make that call. That's not up to you. So in other words, there's this fine line we're talking about here, pre-shoot. There's this fine line of where can a person be extra religious, so to speak, but on the back of somebody else? Where is it for the tovat hakahal, for like everyone's benefit? So it's not something that's so obvious and clear cut. He's going to make that comment at the end of this particular chapter. But I want to mention something in parentheses. Inkvar, I mentioned the word moser. It's also pronounced moiser. What is it? What do both of those words mean? There has been a misuse, I'll be very kind, a misuse of that word for many, many years among the Jewish people. If you go back to Stalinist Russia, go back to the times of the Gulag, go back to the times of the shtetl, yeah, if you handed over a fellow Jew to the government, it's not like there was due process. They were subject to whatever the government felt they were going to do. However, when you talk about a country, Israel, United States, Canada, other countries that have theoretically due process and a non-corrupt government, no snickering at the moment. If someone does something illegal, if I see somebody steal a car, if I say, oh, don't call the police because you're a moser, no, you absolutely call the police. Where it's been misused horrifically for the detriment of hundreds of children is when there's been child sex abuse. Shh, don't say anything. If you give up the person, you're a moser, okay? That person's a shofech damim. He's a murderer as far as I'm concerned. And that person who does sweep it under the rug, instead of being a moser, in quotes, is at that point, anything that happens by the offender to any new victims after that point, the offender is the person who could have done something and didn't is as guilty, if not more so, than the offender himself, and should be castrated, thrown in jail, and left to rot for the rest of his life. That's on a good day. So moser means to hand over a person, a rat, but you hand over someone to the government that you know it's not a legitimate, proper due process of law. They're gonna let's say you stole 2 kopecks from your neighbor, and I get Ivan on the phone, so to speak, and I say, hey Ivan, and they're going to take you and throw you into cold storage for 10 years just because you did that. That's not do any bearing on any kind of law. That's a moser. That you can't do. But when you're going to hand them over to a government that's legitimate, that there's a process and there's lawyers and there's jails, and it's not Mesilat whatsoever.
And it's even like meaning like even if people don't think like the government here there like legitimate or good. That's not
correct.
What it means by it.
Correct. It does. No, it's not what I mean. It means something that's a government that's not a government of law. So I'm mentioning that because of the concept of Mesilat that he mentions here. And any time I have the opportunity to say something like that publicly and on tape, I'm happy to do so. For those of you who are familiar, follow the news at all online, there's I hesitate to use the word man. There's a thing that was allowed to come to Israel, Baruch Lanner, Machshemo, who was a convicted sex offender, who was given an A5 visa to be in Israel and was going to be supposedly given temporary residence and then eventually allowed to make Aliyah to live here. As a hue and cry against this, Ayelet Shaked paskin yesterday that he will not be given the rights to make Aliyah, and he'll have to be thrown out of the country, but he still is allowed to be here until his A5 visa runs out next year for some reason. I don't know why. I would like to know where he lives. If someone knows, please let me know. And I am not joking. Thank you. I can be very mean when it's to help people and protect people. Okay. Next paragraph. Then it says, remember, we said that there are two types of pre-shoot, the good and the bad. And we came to this point from the idea that we had contradictory texts. One said the pre-shoot is terrible, one said it's great. And again, pre-shoot is free to separate yourself from mutar lecha. That which is permitted to you, you still step back from it to a certain degree. But what is the bad pre-shoot? Like the way of fools. It's not that they don't take something for the world that they don't even need. Even that which they do need, they don't take. And they cause their body pain with all kinds of yisurim, which Hashem doesn't want that at all. Now, he talked about this actually at the introduction to the book. He said people think that chassidut and piety means going in freezing cold mikvahs and fasting for 40 days and beating yourself over the chest and sitting in the desert in the hot sun or something like that just to cause yourself physical pain. He says that's just stupidity. That's foolishness. That's not what Hashem wants. It's not what he's looking for. He said, he's mentioned this, I think, also in the beginning, quote this, I think the same Gemara and Tanit, it's prohibited for you to cause yourself physical harm like that and pain. They know that. What happens if a person says, you know what, I'm poor, but I don't want to cause problems. I'd rather starve than have to ask people for money or to take from the tzedakah. If he doesn't take, it's like murder. Okay. In other words, a person does not have a right to do that. I'm going to see why in a second. It says when Hashem created Adam, it says he became the nefesh chaya, living being. The neshama you were given, you have to give it life. Now I'm going to pause here and explain what this means. I have a phone here, right? I have a phone. It's my phone. Now, except for the fact there's an isur of bal tashchit. Most people think bal tashchit is about food, right? Oh, don't throw that out. It's bal tashchit. It's anything. I can't take it just a stamped piece of paper and tear it out. Nothing. You shouldn't just waste and destroy something for the sake of destroying it. If I need to make a point about something and tear a piece of paper, it's fine. But if it's absolutely pointless, there's no. Now, other than the fact there's an isur of bal tashchit, if I want to take this phone, I can destroy it. It's mine. Well, I can kill it. I can destroy it. There are times I've thought about destroying it, but what if this is your phone? I borrowed your phone. Now the responsibility is very different. It's not mine to destroy. Even if I want to destroy it, it's not mine. I'm destroying your property. Elokai neshama shenatata bi torahi. We say it every morning. It's not, by the way, it's not Elokai neshama shenatata. It's Elokai, psik, or comma. You have to make a pause there because you're not saying Hashem's. The shama you put into me is tahara, etc., etc. We have a neshama on loan from God. It's not ours. It's a part of us. It's a chelek elokei mal and everything else, but it is still has on their, so to speak, return to sender, right? Eventually it goes back to God. Eventually it goes back maybe into someone else, but we're not going to get into that today. But it is not ours. It's on loan. We have not even to mention our body, but we have no right to hurt ourselves. We have no right to do anything that could bring ourselves physical harm, emotional harm. I'll give you an example. Does a person have to fast on Tisha B'Av? What's the easy answer? Yeah. This year no one is. This year no one is. Okay, so it's a trick question, but it's still a trick question, even if it wasn't a nidche. Why? No, there are people who can't fast on Tisha B'Av. They take medication and stuff. Fine. Yes, I understand that. What about someone who is anorexic? What about somebody who has any other type of mental health issue they're dealing with that fasting could make it much worse? What if someone is asking a question, can they allow to use birth control, and having another baby could psychologically destroy the woman or the man? We take into consideration in halacha the nefesh and the guf. When we say a mishaberach, it's refuat nefesh or refuat guf. When we talk about refuah from Hashem, the first thing we mention is the nefesh, right? The person who has a mental health issue in Hebrew is a chole nefesh, right? It's a person who has bayot nafshiot. There's like a soul-based issue, but it's not what it means in English. Okay, but it's a mental health issue. Those have to be taken into consideration also. We are not allowed to put ourselves or to allow other people to put themselves in a situation where not only physically it could harm them, but also in the mental health area. Thank God Israel's waking up a lot recently, partially in part to is a friend I have, Stuart Katz. He used to own Israel. Who is doing some amazing things in the world of mental health in Israel. I was thrilled to see that in the United States, they just instituted, I don't know if it's across the country or it's right now in one state, a new number. Instead of 911, if you have a mental health crisis, I think it was 988. I think they just started it last week. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Someone who's committing, God forbid, wants to commit suicide, and someone who's got a house fire calling the same 911. They're obviously trained in these things, but if you bifurcate that and you allow people to specialize in those two areas, that's great. Why am I mentioning all this? Again, because we have to see that we don't have the right to be prushim, to be separatists. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. And to the point where it harms ourselves physically. Not only that, furthermore, it says, a person who fasts excessively, let's say, it's a sore for them to do because it can harm them but that means someone who can't really do it. Now, as a person who has a weak constitution, who says, I'm going to fast 3 days, I'm going to fast every other day, but it causes them physical problems as a result. They're not allowed to do that. A person who can, it's fine. A person's allowed to fast. You can take on themselves. It's called a Tanit Yachid. What does that mean? It's an individual fast. Let's say, I think I mentioned I did this one time my whole life, once, twice. I decide for some reason I did something wrong, or I'm davening for somebody, and I really think that maybe a fast day would be a good thing for additional push for this davening. So I take upon myself to fast. You don't just wake up and say, okay, I'm fasting. The day before, at Mincha, the end of Shemona Esrei, many Sidurim have it. It's a little lashon, little phrase that you say where you accept upon yourself to fast. And you even say there, some of the versions is, if I can't fast all the time, at least I can make it to half the day, to chatzot, and it should still count. You can't just, you can fast if you feel when you wake up, but the proper way to do it is that way. The other kind of personal fast is something called Tanit Chalom. Tanit Chalom is when you've had this, I did do once also. Tanit Chalom is you've woken up in the morning, even on Shabbat, and you've had a horrifically bad dream, and it scares the daylights out of you. And you feel, it's not just scared, but you feel it in your kishkas, as they say, and you can't move along. Then you can fast, should fast if you can. And it says that Tanit Chalom is a good to destroy the bad dream as Esh Lin Oret, like fire to kindling. And even it says Afilu b'Shabbat. You have to make up for it. You have to fast a different day because you fasted Shabbat. You screwed up your Shabbat. But that's a different story. So they're powerful. But again, it has to be a situation where a person is physically able to do it. They can't put themselves in a situation where it could be potentially harmful, again, physically or mentally. And when it comes to this area, a person has to err on the side of caution. Why? Because it says you have to be nishmartem me'od lenafshotechem. You have to be exceedingly careful with your life. So I heard this story. I forgot which Rav it was. Who was known to be very mako when it came to Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, and others. He was saying you shouldn't fast. You shouldn't. This is very mako. You're very lenient. He says, no, I'm very machmir. He says, what do you mean you're machmir? Strict. He says, I'm very machmir in nishmartem ma'od lenafshotechem. But you have to be very careful about your life. And if I have a slightest suspicion it could be physically harmful to the person, they shouldn't fast. Judy. Yeah. Right. So the question is, or the statement is that I mentioned you have to prevent, you have a responsibility to prevent others from harming themselves, right? Okay. We're talking about a person who's in a position that can do something. If I have a friend, God forbid, who's called me up and said, I can't take it anymore. I'm done. I'm checking out. I can't just say, well, have a nice day. Catch you on the other side. No, you have to do something. You pick up the phone. You have to go there, do whatever you can. I mean, otherwise you're going to spend your day just talking to everybody, helping everybody, and doing nothing for yourself. It has to be specifically where you can actually make a difference and do something. That's correct. It's not just carte blanche to give up your life to do everything for everybody. Okay. So he gives us another concept here of Hillel. This is the Hillel, who would get up in the morning. He would make sure he ate. He'd wash his hands and his face and wash his hands in honor of going before his creator. He says, Kal v'chomer. This is a Kal v'chomer of how they used to wash the statues of kings. So just a comment here. I know I've mentioned this before, but it's like, I like saying this because it can't be said too much. When we wake up in the morning, we take the Tilat Yadayim cup, or we take a cup, or whatever we do, we wash our hands. 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, right? So unfortunately, many of us learn as children, got to wipe away the tumah from the night. True. But that's what you want to teach an 8-year-old kid? There's this evil tumah, this horrifically bad stuff. I remember getting the daylight scared out of me that if the water got into the sink and there are dishes there, the tame, the food is spiritually impure, and I'm eating. For an 8-year-old kid? No. How about you're going to get up in the morning, you're going to go in front of your Borei Olam, in front of the creator of the world. You want to at least ritualistically cleanse yourself before you go Borei Olam. Much different approach. You get older, you can explain there's the concept of Tumat Laila, and it gets up to the hands. Fine. You got to adjust how we educate children. Next. Huh? Yeah. Yes. Here's the general, really good rule to follow. Something that you don't really need. Again, we're talking about someone who wants to be one of the Prushim. You should separate yourself from it. It's something that you do need. Since he needs it, if you separate yourself from it, like, I'm not going to eat for a week. I'm not going to drink for a week. You know, I never thought about the halachic ramifications of what's it called? You don't eat for a week because of your protest something, a hunger strike, right? So I never thought about the halachic ramifications of that. It's probably prohibited unless you're able to withstand it. By the way, those quote unquote small case P Palestinian Yamach Shemams in prison, whoever do their hunger strike, first I wish them all the luck in the world, and they should really take the cause all the way and don't give up. Weeks, months, 100 days minimum. And it's sad to see there's so many weaklings there that try it. They stop after like 30 days and you go to the hospital. Or you're Marwan Barghouti and you sneak a chocolate bar in the corner and tell you, yeah, you should be fasting. He says, this is a good rule. But the details of this, meaning what might be okay for you that you really do need, for me might not be required in life. And what will be required for me, you don't necessarily need. So I can't tell you how to act. I can give, from him, he's saying this, I can give you general rules, right? So if it's something you have to have, then use it, do it. But if you want to be a parush, you know, dial it back a little bit. But you can't say that, let's say someone is maybe not a good example. I exercise really on the way. I walk. That's my form of exercise. That and the remote. No. My thumb is so lean. Look at that. I walk. So that's my exercise. But some people will exercise many hours a day. We'll take it to an extreme. And then there's somewhere in the middle. So somewhere in the middle, we may say, I need to exercise 3 times at 3 hours a day minimum for their health, because it makes them feel energetic. For them, maybe that's I don't need that. I don't want that even. So I can't tell them, no, that's bad. No, that's what they need in life to feel good. And especially as we learned in Tanya last night, if you're doing it the last couple of weeks, if you're doing it because you want to be healthy to serve Hashem, that's even better, because you're doing it l'shem shamayim, it brings it to a level of kedusha. That's fine. He's saying that you cannot make it, and this he's implying also, you can't judge somebody else. It says in Pirkei Avot, Al tadin et chavercha shetagiya limkomo. Don't judge someone until you're in their place, but you can never be in their place, and therefore you can never judge somebody. You have to think about that second half. It doesn't say that in the text, but that's the implication. You can never be in the same place as that person. Not physically. I have your life experience. I don't have yours or yours or yours or yours. Thank God. I have my own, right? And you wouldn't want mine. Trust me. Right? We all have our own lives, and you're never going to be me, and I'm never going to be you. So if it says don't judge the person until you're that person in that same position, you're never going to be. Therefore, you can never judge. And that's what he's also implying here. Each lefi his approach. He says, I can't give you all these details. Relax, but it's okay. I'm not judging you either. Okay, I'll back off. It says 2 things here. Number 1, I can't give you all the details here. It's just too much to write. And second of all, we couldn't even really, the mind couldn't really encompass and understand and grasp everything that you need to know about this. But he's giving you some general rules. A, if you need it, you need it. Now, I'm not talking about, I need to speak Lashon Hara. It's how I get through my day, talking about other people. Okay, I will only speak 2 hours instead of 3 hours. See, I'm a parush. What a tzaddik. Don't talk about that. That doesn't mean things that are mutar, things that are permissible, things that are part of living. Do it. If you want to back off a little bit. By the way, again, I repeat, this section of the book, that even though he says it's for yechidim, it's for a small percentage of people, doesn't mean once in a while we can't try something and add something to our lives, right? Again, instead of having, when I was in Chicago, I was in a couple of stores. Now, for those of you who have been in stores in the United States in the last few years, you walk into, whatever is Walmart, Target. So I think that the front corner of the store and the back corner are different zip codes. They're just huge. And it's reflected also in the food choices. There's no such thing anymore as a little pachit, a little can, I call it pop, sorry, deal with it. A little can of pop anymore. It's like 1.25 liters, 3/4 of a liter of a bottle of pop. Like there's no small. The big gulp has become the norm. Right. No, not here. It is unbelievable. So let's assume for a moment you like the big giant amounts. I need the caffeine from the pop every day. Fine. Drink a little bit less a day. Again, if you're doing it because you don't want to overdo it, that's also good for your health. It's also good because you're doing it for this reason. Now, he's given us some general rules. Now he's going to give us a little bit more detail in the next chapter. Parak Yud Daled, chapter 14. So they changed I mentioned this last night for those of you who are in the Tanya class, they changed the Zoom business on the 15th of this month, that it only allows even those who had this, I have through Mesilat Chinuch, it's only 40 minutes I can video. So it just popped up there, 10 minutes left. So I have to figure out what to do. I'll probably have to buy a package to get unlimited time. Anyways, chapter 14, Parak Yud Daled. There are 3 main categories in which you can apply the topic of prishut. In the areas of pleasure, prishut badinim, separation in the area of law, prishut b'minhagim, and also in the area of not just of customs but conduct. What does it say in English, by the way, under that sentence? It say social conduct and conduct Okay, because most people when you took minhag is custom, but here it does mean conduct. Okay, it can also mean minhagim, which we'll see. I gave a shiur once years ago about minhagim. I had 3 parts. It was called minhagim, minhage ta'ut, made the minhagim that came about by through mistakes, and minhage shtut, like foolish minhagim, like stupid minhagim. That was the longer part. No, it's my minhag. It's your minhag. Okay, prishut bahanaot hu mashuskan hiskaru perkakodem. The general idea of prishut from pleasures doesn't mean you're not supposed to have pleasure in this world. Remember that. You are. We're here to benefit from what Hashem gave us, but again, within certain limits. But we already says in the last paragraph, when it comes to prishut, when it comes to pleasure, you mentioned the last paragraph, that you take from this world that which you need only. This includes anything that applies to any of your senses. This has to do with machalot, with food, bi'ilot, sexual relations, malbushim, clothing, tiulim, traveling around, ishmuot, v'chol kiyotzei bazeh. Rak b'yamim sha'oneg behem mitzvah. Look, on days when you're supposed to have like Oneg Shabbat, let's say a person decides, you know what, I'm going to ratchet down the amount of food I eat during the week. Not just because of health and calories and losing weight, but because I want to try to be a little bit more parush. That's fine, just not on Shabbat. On Shabbat, you should eat maybe a little bit more to be where you're supposed to be, to add to your Oneg with a little bit more food. When we moved to Israel, I did not like red wine, dry red wine. I really didn't. My uncle, you should live and be well, introduced me to dry red wine. He said, just try it. And I fell in love with it. I really enjoy it. So we started buying, I have wine almost every Shabbat meal. But I won't drink it during the week. If I'm at a simcha, I will. But to just sit down and drink a glass of wine during the week, I generally not. Thanks to my wife, who said you should only have it on Shabbat. Then I accepted that. Chachmat nashim banta beita. What's that? Chocolate's a different world. Chocolate is a daily requirement. It's in Breshit Lamed Pasuk Daled, where it says, "Thou shalt eat chocolate on a daily basis with high cocoa content, especially if it's good chocolate." Anyways, it's also Masachet Bava Maisa. Anyways, so again, it's not because I want to be parush. It's because I want to make sure that wine I kept is something special for Shabbat. So that's in other words, he's basically saying that the first of the 3 sections I already dealt with. Part 2, prishut badimim, ulachmir behem tamid, to be machmir, lachush afilu divrei yachid b'machloket im ta'amo nir'eh, afilu she'en halacha kamoto, v'itnai shelo yeh chumro kulo. I'll explain this all in a minute. Ulachmir b'sveikot, afilu b'makom she'efshar lahakel behem. You are very well aware, whether you learn Gemara or Shulchan Aruch or not, Jews disagree in areas of halacha, right? They disagree. They disagree a lot of things, but even in areas of halacha, one person says this is the halacha, one says no, it's not that, it's this. But Baruch Hashem, we have more or less conclusive statements from the Rambam and then the Shulchan Aruch of what our halacha is, and here's how it is. But there's yesh omri. There's still those who say X. He's not so machmer, I guess. It's okay. It's not bothering me. So he said a person who wants to be involved in prishut should be more machmir in their approach to things. Even if it's what's called a dat yachid, it's just a single individual that holds this, as long as it's logical. In other words, he can find logic in that approach, that this person who says it's asur or it's mutar, that you do it only because that there's logic, not just somebody said, no, you shouldn't do it. You know, the Gemara tells us, koach tehetera adif, which means the power of saying mutar, it's okay to do something, is much stronger than saying it's asur. Why? If you call me up, can I do X? It requires zero thought and knowledge to say asur. I don't have to know anything to say you can't do it. Can I, ride my bike on Shabbat? Asur. It's easy to say. Can I parachute with no, jump out of a plane without a parachute? Asur. I don't have to know anything besides the fact that's ridiculous. Anyways, to say it's okay, you have to know a little bit, sometimes a lot of it. And and people need to know that there's questions that have to be asked, and they should be asked, and it's great to ask questions. And sometimes a person can say, look, I look at the Shulchan Aruch, the halacha is X, and then the Brahma or the Shulchan Aruch himself adds the Yesh Omrim blah blah blah. There are those who say that this is the halacha. It's a more stringent approach. And say, you know what? I want to take that upon myself. Not a problem. Matter of fact, someone who's parush, that's good. Unfortunately, there are people who have the approach in life. I have not met a chumrah I didn't like. I wanted to start a series called the Chumrah of the Month Club. A new chumrah every week, and you have to pay to get the new chumrah. I would be rich. I could just see the money flowing in. I've made up a couple in my life just to see what people would do with them. In any case, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone who seeks out chumrah, but someone says, here's the halacha. I understand the direction halacha, and there is this opinion that says this, and it's even mentioned, I want to do that. Give you a good example. Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, in Igrot Moshe, I think it's Chelik Gimel of Orach Chaim. It's been a long time since I looked inside. I think talks about making coffee on Shabbat for Ashkenazim. Sfaradim can just pour the hot water right onto the coffee crystals, and it's a shachor, instant. I never do it in public though, because if I'm in something at the Pnei Shmuel, I'm not going to do it like that. Anyways, so he talks about can you pour right onto the crystals? No. You need a kli sheni or kli shlishi or whatever it is, and he passes kli sheni. He says, for myself, I use a kli shlishi, but you don't have to do it. There's a gadol hador. Actually, it's gidol hador. I only learned that recently. We all say it wrong because it's smichut. It means the greatest one of the generations, gidol. But we all say gadol. Okay, so the gadol hador, Reb Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, Moshe lo kam Moshe, said, look. It's fine. You absolutely can use a kli sheni to make hot water, to make coffee on Shabbat. I want to be a little more machmer myself. You don't have to. I'm going to use a kli shlishi. So here you have a good example. Very good example. A person who was an unbelievable anav, a person who was extremely humble. He was once asked, he was at a wedding. They were davening mincha or barav, and whoever was the chazan waited for him to finish one esrei. Whoever says, I understand why you waited for me. He says, the Rosh Yeshiva. He says, yeah, but we're not in yeshiva right now. He didn't, this is who he was. So if he can say, I'll be macher for myself, you don't be macher for yourself. So no question about it. That's the idea. It's not just because he wanted to out from somebody. Look, I'm more macher than you. Hey, look, everybody, I even marked kli shlishi, you see, because I'm so from. That's not who he was. That's not what means parush. Person wants to show it off and person wants to throw it in your face is exact opposite of being seeking pre-shuv. I'm going to stop here in the middle of this paragraph. This is going to stop anyways. We'll pick it up Bezrat Hashem next week and in the middle of this. And I wish everyone a wonderful day.